Hey guys, welcome to Taylor's Thoughts. And today we're going to be discussing healthcare, a little bit anyway, or more so the money associated in healthcare.
Right here, it would take an HCA nurse 3 months of labor to make what he makes in 1 hour. And my friends, the capitalism has rotted our brains because no one is looking around and going, why? If the CEO did not show up to work tomorrow, I guarantee you the world would keep spinning, right? The hospitals
He has a point. The C-suite level people at hospitals, most of the time, are business people. They went to business school. They did not go to any type of medical schooling, OT, PT, speech, nursing, respiratory, phlebotomy, CNA, rad tech, whatever that might be. So yeah, if and I can say we peons because I'm an occupational therapist at a hospital, and if we didn't show up to work, the hospital would not function. But if the CEO of the hospital did not show up, or the CNO, or the CFO, or any of the other C-suite people didn't show up, the hospital would still run. And guess what? They can do their jobs from home. We can't.
would still function and patients would still receive care. If I don't show up to work, people die.
Him as a nurse, yeah. I mean, everywhere is short-staffed.
It is unconscionable to make $30 million on the backs of sick and dying people. Even
Okay. First of all, HCA's overall president is Sam Hazen. And from what I could research, he does not make $30 million. I mean, it's 26.7 according to what I Googled, but $26.7 million a year. Granted, being a CEO of a major, major corporation, like HCA has hospitals all over the country and even like in the UK. So it's a huge corporation. Um, but yeah, making $26.7 million a year when I am thankful they could have not given us raises at all with the way the economy is right now. So I'm thankful for my what equated to a 77 raise. So I work for an HCA hospital and I got a 1.77% raise, which for me equated to less than $1 an hour raise. But yet the CEO is making $26.7 million a year. Now, granted, I will say Sam Hazen took a pay cut. I think it was during 2020 or 2021 during the pandemic. And I can't remember off the top of my head how much that was. I should look into that. I should have looked into that before this video, but it just kind of popped up on me.
more so when you are profiting off of healthcare that you cannot provide. Healthcare is not expensive because your doctor drives a BMW. It's expensive because business people who provide value to you, the patient in the bed, are exploiting your illness. And it's not
I wouldn't go as far as exploiting, but they also are putting into place policies and procedures that they have no business doing because they've never been at the bedside. They don't know what goes on day to day on the hospital floor. They don't know that, yes, on paper, this policy or procedure looks great, looks like it's going to save so much time and energy. But in the trenches, in the day to day of it, it just adds to the work of the nurses, the staff, and then just makes them more frustrated.
just CEOs. There are office buildings full of people who work in healthcare who do not provide you any value. Insurance companies, administration. There are far too many suits making far too much money in healthcare when they can neither provide for your health nor do they care. And I'm not
Yeah, preach. Because think about that all that goes into a hospital stay. You get admitted to the ER. So you have your ER nurse or nurses, depending on how long you're in the ER doc, the rad tech, phlebotomy, drawing your blood, registration coming to make sure all of your information is correct, including your insurance information so that it gets billed correctly, hopefully the first time. And then after that, you get up to the floor if you get admitted. And then you have nurse, CNA, again, phlebotomy, rad techs, therapy coming in, um, EVS, like the housekeepers, and dietary services. And then you have maintenance, and then you have the health information management people, and IT, and case managers, and so many other pieces of the puzzle, quality managers. and sepsis coordinators and all of these types of things that you didn't necessarily think existed within a hospital that exist. And why are they there? They probably have a purpose, but is it costing you more money? Probably. Insurance is probably the biggest reason why healthcare in America costs so much, because you have to pay a monthly premium for the insurance, but then you still have to pay copays and coinsurance and all this other crap until you hit a deductible, and then maybe hit your out-of-pocket max, and then maybe if you're sick enough, you'll hit your out-of-pocket max. Otherwise, you're just paying monthly, and then you're still having to pay for medical care. And not only that, but what about those that can't afford insurance under Obamacare, which I know he's like proud to call it that, we call it that, but insurance and medical costs just keep going up because more and more people cannot afford insurance. So those of us that do are paying for people who can't or won't, or whatever the case may be. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have access to healthcare, because you absolutely should. Do I think we should be a system like Canada where the government controls it? Absolutely not, because I should be able to say who and when and where. And I know there's a lot of probably ins and outs of the Canadian system and other government run healthcare programs that I don't know about. But I want to be able to decide what is right for me, for myself. I don't want the government telling me who, what, when, where, or why. I don't want the government telling me that I can't get something done because I don't have the qualifications, or I don't have the symptoms, or I don't have this, that, or the other thing. And like I said, I don't know the ins and outs of the Canadian system or any other government run system, but I look at how they run food stamps and WIC and the foster care system, and how most government run programs aren't super smooth. They aren't super great. They aren't super well managed. And so, like, just not interested in it. But anyway.
I'm not saying I need to make $30 million. I am saying that we are placing value in entirely the wrong place. I said at the end of this video that he should take a pay cut and properly staff his nurses, but that's an entirely lukewarm opinion, and it's not actually what I believe. I believe it is fundamentally evil to make $30 million on the backs of nurses busting their ass trying to save lives during a pandemic.
And during the pandemic, thankfully, I will say, during the pandemic, we did not, at least at my facility, we did not have to worry about masks, gowns, face shields. We had the PPE that we needed to protect ourselves. And I'm very thankful for that. I'm very thankful for the resources that HCA does have. So where we weren't having to use trash bags or reuse masks that were falling apart, or I don't know, I can't even remember all the umpteen million things that other nurses and hospital staff were having to do. But I'm just thankful that I was able to have the equipment to safely protect myself during the pandemic. And yes, being the CEO of a large company, Sam Hazen just didn't get that just by waking up one morning and saying, I wanted to be the CEO. I'm sure he had to work hard to get to where he's at. But that, again, that doesn't negate the fact that he should be making almost $30 million a year when he can't pay his staff. Like, I have not gotten a raise to combat inflation since I started. Granted, I've worked there 4 years, but it would just be nice, to get a raise, or not just a pizza party or candy, or like, yeah, those are fun and morale boosters, but at the end of the day, it doesn't help me pay my bills.
And he should be tried for his crimes against humanity. I'm like, kind of.
He says he's like kind of kidding, but he's kind of not. But like, I don't think that's a crime against humanity to make what he makes as the CEO of a very large hospital corporation. Like, he has headaches that you probably don't even want to know about. So, like, yes, nursing is hard. Do I want to be a nurse? Absolutely not, because I don't do well with blood or poking people with things or a lot of other things that nurses have to deal with that I don't want to have to deal with. But I do want to help people, and that's why I went into healthcare.
Kidding, but I'm kind of not. Nurses everywhere watch people die all the time for the sake of profits. It is profitable for hospitals to poorly staff nurses, and
Well, duh. The hospital uses the least amount of staff possible, then of course that makes bigger profits. And unfortunately, healthcare in America is a for-profit system. So of course we're going to run into these things where businesses make decisions that can poorly affect patient outcomes, patient care, but we don't do anything about it because at the end of the day, all they care about is the bottom line.
for every patient a nurse takes out of ratio, the risk of mortality for all of their patients increases. They are comfortable gambling with your risk of mortality in order to improve their bottom line.
Like an ICU ratio, depending on the intensity, is like 2-to-1. Our hospital sticks to that fairly well. Now, sometimes they have what we call overflow patients that are in the unit that are just waiting on a bed to go out to the floor, so they're not considered like a critical care patient anymore. But otherwise, on the floor, when I first started, it was 5 patients to 1 nurse. And now I think it's up to 6 or 7. And to me, that's just, how do you expect one person to know all of the ins and outs of 7 people for a 12-hour shift and to know where they're at and where they're going and what testing they need and what labs they need drawn or what things to look out for? And the medicines alone, like the amount of medications people are on is ridiculous. And I think that's another problem in our country, that instead of like finding the root cause, we just say, oh, here's a pill. Oh, this pill will make you feel better. Oh, but then this pill causes this side effect. And so here's another pill to cover up that side effect. And I could get on soapbox with that, but that's not what this video is about. So I should have looked up what the safe patient ratio is, because I think it's actually like 4-to-1 for a floor nurse, meaning like your typical med surg, ortho, non-critical care floor. And I'm sure different types of ICUs have different patient safety ratios, like the burn unit versus a trauma ICU versus a just like a medical ICU versus a pediatric ICU, and all of those types of things. And so at the end of the line, it does unfortunately come to the bottom dollar, and that's sad. I wouldn't necessarily call it evil, but it's sad and disheartening that at the end of the day, we care more about how much money our company makes than what our employees or what the patients that we serve go through.
That is evil. Before the CEO of a healthcare company makes $30 million a year, you better be sure that all of the patients in the hospital are receiving the best possible treatment. But that's not what's happening. They're poorly staffing nurses and they're cutting corners so assholes like this can have a 3rd houseboat on the moon or something. It's exploitation.
I just have to laugh because like their 3rd houseboat on the moon or something, like that's just ridiculous in and of itself. But he does make a lot of good points. Like, you should be making sure that your facilities are staffed appropriately, that they have the supplies they need to provide the care that patients deserve, and that your staff isn't having to run ragged, or that turnover isn't at such a high rate that you're constantly having to orient new people. Like, I get people leave jobs for a variety of different reasons. But have you really looked at why your nurses, your techs, radiologists, radiology techs, therapists, like any of the gambit in the hospital are leaving? Have you really like looked into it, or are you just like, well, if this staff member that's worked here for 5 years leaves, then we can hire somebody, at like half the rate or whatever. Like, it's just ridiculous to me that we do not treat healthcare workers with the respect, or we don't give them the respect that they deserve, not only like on a face-to-face basis, but also on a financial basis. Since COVID, the burnout rate has been astronomical because nurses were having to work 12-hour shifts, sometimes 16-hour shifts. And the amount of death that I saw just as a therapist working in an acute care hospital, and I didn't even like see people dying necessarily. I wasn't holding their hands as they died. I was just watching the funeral home come to pick up bodies, or the nurses like wheeling them down to the morgue until whoever would come pick them up. Like, that had an effect on me. And I didn't hold their hands while they died. I didn't do CPR while they were dying and while they were trying to get back a rhythm running a code. Like, none of that happened to me. So I can only imagine the burnout that the nurses are having to deal with that day in and day out. And then not feeling like they are respected enough or valued enough because the CEO makes so much. But again, CEOs of a multi-billion-dollar company are going to make money. Like, there's no in or out about that.
And it is tantamount to murder. And I don't know, maybe you disagree. Maybe I'm just a tiny brain bedside nurse and I don't understand the art of business. But when push comes to shove between me and the CEO, only one of us can save your life. So maybe do some reflection on whose labor we should be valuing.
Again, he makes some good points throughout this whole video, but at the same time, like, bedside nurses have a huge value. So much knowledge and so much stuff that nurses have to know. Like, I could never go to nursing school. Even with my master's degree, I probably would not. I probably don't have as much knowledge as a nurse has, but also, like, we have two different skill sets. And so there's value in that. And yes, running a business, like being a bedside nurse, unless you have like a side business or you grew up helping your family business or something along those lines, yeah, you probably don't know a whole lot about business. But at the same time, being in management is hard. Running a company is hard. Do I speak from experience? No. But I can see what my manager and my director of my department go through and the stupid things that they have to deal with, that I can only imagine being the top dog of all hospitals, of all HCA facilities across the United States and the UK. It's probably worth almost $30 million a year dealing with the headaches and the 3 a.m. phone calls, but that's what you signed up for as a CEO of a large company. Like, part of that is just part of the deal. So healthcare as a whole could do better to value the staff that fills hospitals, that fills doctors' offices, that fills pharmacies, that any healthcare related, we need to do better to support our healthcare workers, whether that's in the hospital, nursing home, outpatient therapy, pharmacy, and anywhere in between that I didn't mention. We need to do better because people do not respect healthcare workers. For that, like, what, 3 months of COVID, we were heroes. And now we're just little peons again. So the next time you encounter a nurse or any other healthcare worker that might just, might be having a bad day, we're allowed to have bad days just like anybody else. But a smile can go a huge way. So instead of having a rude remark, or I think there needs to be some changes in our healthcare field. They're not going to be quick changes. That's not probably something that's going to change because most people aren't educated with how our healthcare system works to know that it needs to be changed. That's it for today's Taylor's Thoughts.